What happens when one of Britain's most beloved acting legends faces off against a morning television host in an argument so fierce it ends with him being escorted off the set? It only took 23 seconds for Sir Ian McKellen to get kicked off Good Morning Britain after a heated argument with Kate Garraway that left the entire studio in absolute shock. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to the channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Hit that subscribe button now because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Last night's episode of Good Morning Britain was supposed to be a warm celebration of Sir Ian McKellen's incredible career spanning decades on stage and screen. The legendary actor was there to discuss his latest theatrical project, a new production that had been generating considerable excitement in theater circles, and everyone expected the usual charming conversation filled with anecdotes about his time playing Gandalf and Magneto, stories from his long career bringing joy to millions of fans around the world. The production team had been thrilled to have him on, knowing that having such a respected figure would draw viewers and create a positive, uplifting segment for the morning show that would set a wonderful tone for the rest of the broadcast. Instead, what unfolded was one of the most uncomfortable and explosive moments in the show's history, a complete breakdown that left everyone involved questioning what had just happened and how it had spiraled so completely out of control. From the moment Sir Ian walked onto the set, he seemed in good spirits, his characteristic warmth and graciousness on full display. The studio audience applauded warmly, showing their appreciation for an actor who has given so much to British theatre and cinema over his long and distinguished career, someone who has become a national treasure through his dedication to his craft. He greeted Kate Garraway with a genuine smile, shaking her hand and settling into the bright red sofa that guests sit on during their interviews. Kate welcomed him enthusiastically, telling him how honored they were to have him on the show and how much everyone admired his work, both on stage and on screen. The conversation started pleasantly enough, exactly what you'd expect from a morning show appearance by such a distinguished guest who has done countless interviews over the years. Kate asked him about his upcoming theatrical production, what had drawn him to the material, and what audiences could expect when they came to see the show at the theater. Sir Ian answered with his characteristic eloquence, speaking passionately about the themes of the play and why he felt it was important to tell this particular story at this particular moment in time, given everything happening in the world. He talked about the power of live theater, how it connects people in ways that film and television cannot, creating a shared experience in a darkened auditorium that stays with audiences long after the curtain falls and they return to their daily lives. His passion for the stage was evident in every word, his love for the art form shining through. Kate then asked about his most famous roles, the characters that had made him a household name around the world and introduced him to entirely new generations of fans. Sir Ian spoke warmly about playing Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings films, sharing some behind-the-scenes stories about working with Peter Jackson in the stunning landscapes of New Zealand. He talked about the physical challenges of the role, the long days in costume and makeup that could be grueling, but also the immense joy of bringing such a beloved character to life for a new generation of fans who might never have experienced Tolkien's work otherwise. He shared anecdotes about the other cast members, the friendships that had formed during the long months of filming. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, the kind of engaging, entertaining interview that morning television thrives on, the kind that makes viewers feel connected to the celebrities they admire. But then Kate shifted the conversation in a different direction, one that would prove to be catastrophic for the rest of the interview. She brought up some recent comments Sir Ian had made about the theater industry and its treatment of older actors, comments that had generated some discussion in theater circles and among industry professionals. The way she framed her question wasn't curious or supportive. It was challenging, almost confrontational from the very first word. She suggested that perhaps Sir Ian was being unfair in his criticism, that maybe he didn't fully appreciate how much the industry had changed and improved over the years, how many more opportunities existed now than when he started his career. The implication was clear. She thought he was wrong, and she was going to challenge him on it right there on live television in front of millions of viewers. Sir Ian's expression changed immediately, the transformation visible to everyone watching. The warm smile faded from his face, replaced by a look of surprise mixed with displeasure, confusion about why the tone had shifted so suddenly. He asked Kate what exactly she meant by that comment, his voice still polite but with a noticeable edge to it that hadn't been there moments before during their pleasant discussion. The studio atmosphere shifted perceptibly, that comfortable morning television feeling evaporating as tension began to build between host and guest. Kate pressed forward, not recognizing or perhaps not caring about the warning signs that she was treading on dangerous ground. She said that surely Sir Ian, with his incredibly successful career and all the opportunities he'd been given over the decades, couldn't really claim the industry had treated him unfairly or that systemic problems existed. She suggested that maybe he was being a bit dramatic about the challenges facing older performers, that perhaps things weren't quite as bad as he'd made them sound in his comments to the press. The way she said it felt dismissive, condescending even, as if she was lecturing someone with 50 years of experience in the profession about their own industry and their own lived experiences. Sir Ian sat up straighter on the sofa, his posture becoming more formal, more defensive, his entire demeanor changing. He told Kate very clearly that he wasn't talking about his own career. He was talking about countless talented actors who hadn't had the same opportunities he'd been blessed with, who had struggled to find work as they aged despite their abilities and dedication to their craft. He said it was precisely because of his privileged position, because of the platform his fame had given him, that he felt a responsibility to speak up about these issues, to use his voice to advocate for those who didn't have one, who couldn't speak out without risking what little work they could get. His voice was measured but firm, making it clear he wasn't going to back down from his position or let her dismiss these concerns. Kate responded by suggesting that maybe Sir Ian was out of touch with how the modern entertainment industry actually works these days. She said times had changed dramatically since he started his career, that there were more opportunities now than ever before for actors of all ages, that streaming services and independent productions had opened up the field considerably. She implied that his perspective might be outdated, stuck in the past, that he was looking at the industry through an old-fashioned lens that no longer reflected the reality of modern show business. The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, and it was clearly not sitting well with her guest, who was visibly bristling at the suggestion. The legendary actor's jaw tightened visibly, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He leaned forward and told Kate that he finds it quite remarkable, quite extraordinary, really, when television presenters think they understand his profession better than he does. He said he's been working in theater and film since before she was born, that he's witnessed firsthand the systemic issues that plague the industry, the discrimination that happens behind closed doors. He said dismissing his concerns as being out of touch was not only insulting to him personally, but to every actor who has experienced these problems, every performer who has struggled to find work simply because they've aged. His voice was rising now, the famous controlled delivery giving way to genuine frustration and anger. Kate's face flushed slightly, color rising in her cheeks, but she didn't back down from her position. She told Sir Ian that having a long career doesn't automatically mean someone can't be wrong about the current state of affairs, that longevity doesn't equal infallibility. She said the industry had made significant progress in recent years on many fronts, and perhaps he wasn't giving that progress enough credit, wasn't acknowledging the positive changes that had occurred. She suggested that his comments might actually be harmful, potentially discouraging young people from pursuing careers in the arts when there were actually more opportunities available than his pessimistic view suggested. The accusation that he was doing damage to aspiring actors was a particularly low blow. That comment seemed to genuinely anger Sir Ian in a way the previous exchanges hadn't quite managed. He told Kate that she had absolutely no right to tell him his lived experiences were wrong, that what he and countless others had witnessed and endured over decades in the industry didn't matter, because she had a different opinion based on what exactly? He asked what her credentials were, what gave her the authority to pronounce judgment on these matters. He said it takes extraordinary arrogance to sit there with a morning television job and lecture someone about an industry she's never worked in, challenges she's never personally faced, discrimination she's never experienced. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and cutting, impossible to ignore. The studio went very quiet, an uncomfortable silence falling over the entire space. You could see the production team in the background starting to look concerned. exchanging worried glances and making subtle gestures to each other, clearly wondering if they should intervene somehow. This was not how these segments were supposed to go. Not at all. Morning television is supposed to be light, breezy, comfortable viewing for people having their breakfast. This was becoming anything but that, transforming into something dark and confrontational that viewers weren't expecting. Kate told Sir Ian that she was simply asking questions, doing her job as a journalist to probe and challenge assertions made by public figures. She said if his position was sound, if he really believed what he was saying, he should be able to defend it without getting defensive and angry about being questioned. She accused him of overreacting to legitimate journalistic inquiry, of being unable to handle having his views questioned and examined. The implication that he was being unreasonable, that his anger was the problem rather than her questions, was clear and obviously calculated to provoke him further. Sir Ian's voice took on a steely quality, the kind of commanding presence he brings to his greatest theatrical performances. He told Kate that there's a profound difference between legitimate journalistic inquiry and talking down to someone from a position of complete ignorance about the subject at hand. He said she clearly had no understanding of the issues he was discussing, no real knowledge of how the theater and film industries actually operate behind the scenes, yet she felt entitled to dismiss his concerns and question his motivations based on nothing but her own assumptions. He called it the height of presumption, this attitude that television presenters somehow have authority to pronounce judgment on subjects they know nothing about, that having a microphone somehow grants them expertise they haven't earned. Kate's co-host tried to intervene at this point, attempting to lighten the mood or redirect the conversation to safer ground, away from this increasingly hostile exchange. But Kate cut him off mid-sentence, saying she needed to finish this line of questioning, that it was important. She told Sir Ian that getting this upset over a few questions suggested that maybe there was something to her points, that perhaps he knew deep down she was right, and his reaction was defensive because of that uncomfortable truth. The pop psychology attempt to analyze his emotional state was condescending and only served to make things worse. The legendary actor stood up from the sofa, a sudden movement that clearly caught everyone by surprise, the studio crew visibly startled. He looked down at Kate and told her very clearly that he didn't come on this show to be insulted by someone who apparently decided before he even arrived that she was going to attack him rather than have a genuine conversation. He said he'd been excited to talk about his work, to share his passion for theater with the audience watching at home, to discuss the production he was so proud of. But she'd made that impossible with her aggressive, condescending attitude, with her determination to turn this into a confrontation rather than an interview. Kate stood up as well, her voice rising to match his volume and intensity. She told Sir Ian that if he couldn't handle basic questions about his public statements, maybe he shouldn't make those statements in the first place, shouldn't use his platform to criticize if he can't take criticism himself. She said actors often think they're beyond criticism, that their fame and their talent somehow protects them from having to justify their opinions or face scrutiny. She accused him of expecting to be treated with kid gloves just because of his reputation and his age, of thinking that being Sir Ian McKellen meant nobody could challenge what he said. That final comment seemed to be the breaking point, the moment when Sir Ian's patience completely ran out. His voice was shaking with anger when he responded, barely able to contain the fury he felt at her words. He told Kate that respect has nothing to do with his fame or his age. It has everything to do with basic human decency and professional courtesy, things that apparently mean nothing to her. He said she'd shown neither today, that she'd been rude, dismissive, and deliberately antagonistic from the moment she shifted the conversation away from his work and toward her agenda. He said it was beneath the standards he expected from British broadcasting, beneath what he thought Good Morning Britain represented as a program. Kate shot back that British broadcasting wasn't about coddling celebrities who want everything to be easy and flattering, who expect to come on television and have everyone nod along with whatever they say. She said real journalism means asking tough questions and holding people accountable for their words and actions, even when those people are famous and respected. She suggested that Sir Ian's reaction showed he wasn't used to being challenged, that he expected everyone to just nod along with whatever he said because of who he was, because of his status and his knighthood. Sir Ian told Kate that she was confusing accountability with rudeness, that she was hiding behind the excuse of journalism to be deliberately confrontational and disrespectful to a guest on her show. He said there was nothing brave or admirable about talking down to a guest on your show, nothing journalistic about dismissing someone's professional expertise because you've decided you know better based on your own limited perspective. His words were precise, cutting, delivered with the same command and authority he brings to his greatest stage performances, making every syllable count. The co-host was trying desperately to intervene now, speaking over both of them with increasing urgency, trying to restore some order to the rapidly deteriorating situation unfolding on live television. But neither Kate nor Sir Ian was paying attention to him anymore, both too focused on their argument. They were locked in their confrontation, neither willing to back down or give an inch, both committed to their positions and determined to have the last word. Kate told Sir Ian that his condescending tone proved her point about how he viewed people like her, people who worked in television journalism. She said he clearly thought morning television presenters were beneath him, not worthy of questioning his pronouncements or challenging his views. She accused him of elitism, of looking down on working journalists who didn't have fancy theatrical credentials or decades of stage experience, who hadn't been knighted by the Queen. Sir Ian's response was immediate and forceful, his anger fully unleashed now. He told Kate that the only person being condescending in this conversation was her, that she'd been patronizing him from the moment she started challenging his views without any knowledge or understanding of what she was talking about. He said he's always had enormous respect for journalists who do their jobs with integrity and fairness, who ask tough questions but do so from a place of genuine curiosity rather than antagonism. But what she'd done today had nothing to do with real journalism. It was an ambush, pure and simple, designed to create conflict rather than illuminate truth. Kate's voice was sharp when she replied, dripping with sarcasm. She told Sir Ian that if he felt ambushed by a few questions, he was far too sensitive for someone with such a public profile, someone who had been in the spotlight for so many years. She said celebrities come on shows like this knowing they might be challenged, knowing they might face questions they don't like, and if he couldn't handle that basic reality, he shouldn't have agreed to appear in the first place. She suggested his reaction was disproportionate and frankly embarrassing for someone of his stature and experience. That was clearly the final straw, the comment that made Sir Ian's decision for him. He told Kate and the production team that he was done, that he wouldn't sit there and be insulted any longer by someone who clearly had no interest in a real conversation. He said he'd come on the show in good faith, expecting a professional conversation about his work and his passion for theater. But instead, he'd been subjected to what felt like a deliberate attempt to provoke and humiliate him on live television. His voice carried genuine hurt along with the anger, disappointment that what should have been a pleasant morning had turned into something so ugly. Kate called out, asking if he was really going to storm off just because someone disagreed with him, just because he'd faced a bit of pushback on his views. She said it would look terrible for him, that people would see him as unable to handle criticism, as someone who runs away when challenged instead of standing his ground and defending his position. The manipulation in her words was obvious, a last desperate attempt to shame him into staying by threatening his reputation and public image. Sir Ian turned back to face her, making direct and unwavering eye contact. He told her very clearly that there's nothing wrong with refusing to participate in a conversation that has become abusive and disrespectful. He said, walking away from someone who is being deliberately hostile isn't weakness, it's self-respect. It's maintaining boundaries and refusing to be treated poorly. He told the audience he was sorry they had to witness this unpleasant exchange, that he'd hoped to have a meaningful conversation with them about theater and his passion for performing, but that clearly wasn't possible given how the host had chosen to conduct herself. The production team was in visible chaos now, people rushing around frantically. Producers were giving conflicting instructions, trying to figure out what to do, whether to cut to commercial immediately or try to salvage something from this disaster. The co-host was attempting to speak to the cameras, to somehow explain what was happening to the viewers at home, but his words were jumbled and uncertain, reflecting the confusion everyone felt. Kate made one more comment, something about Sir Ian proving he couldn't handle modern broadcasting, that he belonged to an era when everyone deferred to famous actors. But her voice was drowned out by the commotion in the studio, by the sound of people moving and talking urgently. Sir Ian was already removing his microphone, unclipping it with sharp, decisive movements that made his intentions crystal clear to everyone watching. The legendary actor walked toward the studio exit, his posture straight and dignified despite the circumstances, every inch the distinguished performer he'd been for decades on stage and screen. He wasn't running away or fleeing in embarrassment or shame, wasn't letting Kate's final barbs affect his composure. He was leaving with his head held high, making a clear statement that he wouldn't tolerate being treated disrespectfully regardless of the setting or the audience watching at home, regardless of the platform or the reach of the broadcast. Every step was measured, purposeful, showing that even in leaving, he maintained complete control of himself and the situation, refusing to let the confrontation diminish his dignity in any way. Security personnel appeared near the exit, moving quickly but cautiously, not to forcibly remove him, but to escort him out, given how heated things had become between him and Kate, how personal the argument had turned. They weren't needed, though. Sir Ian had said everything he needed to say and had no intention of prolonging the confrontation any further or giving Kate any more opportunities to insult him or question his character and his commitment to his profession. The studio doors opened, and Sir Ian McKellen walked through them with the same grace he'd brought to countless stage entrances over his long career, leaving behind a show in complete disarray. Kate was still standing by the sofa, her expression a mixture of defiance and what might have been dawning realization about how badly things had gone, how this would be perceived by viewers watching at home. The co-host was trying to transition to something else, anything else, his voice strained with stress and uncertainty about what to say next or how to move forward. Behind those closing doors, the chaos continued to unfold throughout the studio. Production staff were scrambling frantically, trying to figure out next steps, whether to continue broadcasting or cut away entirely. The audience sat in stunned silence, many with expressions of shock and disbelief, processing what they'd just witnessed happen to one of Britain's most respected actors. Some looked sympathetic toward Sir Ian, others seemed confused by the entire exchange. But Sir Ian was gone, having made his exit from Good Morning Britain in the most dramatic fashion imaginable after an argument with Kate Garraway that went from uncomfortable to explosive in a matter of moments. The cameras captured every second of the aftermath, the shock plainly visible on the crew's faces, the audience's stunned reactions as they looked at each other trying to understand what had happened, the complete collapse of what should have been a pleasant morning television interview celebrating a beloved actor's career and latest theatrical project. The segment that was supposed to be a highlight of the morning had instead become a disaster that everyone involved would want to forget.